Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Harry What If. We are thrilled to present today's story. What if Susan Bones secretly loved Harry since age 5 and revealed it when he needed someone most? If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, The Girl Who Remembered. The first time Susan Bones saw Harry Potter, she was 5 years old, clutching her Aunt Amelia's hand at the Ministry of Magic's memorial for the fallen heroes of the war. Her small fingers traced the golden letters of her Uncle Edgar's name while tears streamed down Aunt Amelia's normally stoic face. "Who did this to my family?" Susan had whispered. Aunt Amelia knelt down, her monocle catching the light. "Evil men, Susan. But they were stopped by brave people like your parents and by one miracle no one understands." That's when Susan noticed him, a tiny boy with unruly black hair and taped glasses, standing beside a towering bearded man. People kept approaching them, shaking the boy's hand while he shrunk further into himself. "That's Harry Potter," Amelia said quietly. "The boy who lived." Susan watched as the small boy flinched when a witch tried to touch his forehead. He looked lost, confused, and utterly alone despite the crowd swarming him. Something in Susan's heart twisted. "He looks sad," she said. "He lost his parents to the same evil that took yours. Does he have an Aunt Amelia too?" A shadow crossed her aunt's face. "No, sweetheart. I don't think he has anyone like me." That night, Susan had added Harry Potter to her bedtime prayers. For years afterward, she would ask her aunt for news about the boy who lived, collecting Daily Prophet clippings in a scrapbook hidden under her mattress. 10 years later, Susan stared at her plate in the great hall, pushing scrambled eggs around without appetite. The morning's Daily Prophet lay beside her, declaring Harry Potter a delusional attention seeker. Again. "You know it's true," Zacharias Smith was saying loudly from down the Hufflepuff table. "Potter's gone mental. My dad says it's probably trauma from the tournament. Tragic, but dangerous to be spreading lies about you-know-who." Susan's fork clattered against her plate. "They're not lies." Heads turned toward her. Hannah Abbott's eyes widened in surprise. "Come off it, Bones," Zacharias scoffed. "You weren't there. Diggory died in an accident, and Potter's using it to what?" Susan stood up, surprising herself as much as everyone else. Hufflepuffs didn't cause scenes. To make his life harder. To get death threats by Owl. To be treated like a pariah. Ernie Macmillan adjusted his prefect badge nervously. "Susan, I understand loyalty, but there's simply no evidence. Cedric," Susan said, her voice shaking, "was murdered. Harry brought his body back when he could have saved himself. And now he's being tortured for telling the truth." The silence at the table turned frigid. "Tortured?" Hannah whispered. "What are you talking about?" Susan grabbed her bag. "Never mind." She strode out of the hall, her heart hammering. She hadn't meant to say that last part. She'd noticed the marks on Harry's hand 2 days ago in the library, raw, red lines forming words. She'd recognized Umbridge's handiwork immediately. Aunt Amelia had warned her about blood quills and their illegality. The sound of footsteps made her turn. Hannah rushed toward her, blonde pigtails bouncing. "Wait. Susan." Susan kept walking. "I've got herbology." "So do I." Hannah caught up. "Since when are you Potter's biggest offender?" Susan clutched her books tighter. "Someone has to be. But you never even talked to him." "That's not," Susan stopped herself. It wasn't entirely true. She and Harry had been polite acquaintances for years. They'd partnered in herbology occasionally. She'd even managed full sentences around him since 3rd year. But Hannah was right, they weren't friends. "Look," Susan said finally. "My aunt says the ministry's smear campaign is political. Fudge is terrified of losing power." Hannah's eyes widened. Your aunt. Madam Bones actually believes Potter. She has concerns about the official story. Susan didn't add that Aunt Amelia had spent the summer poring over classified reports, growing more grim with each passing day. Or that she'd warned Susan to be careful at school this year, to watch for unusual behavior among classmates whose parents had suspicious connections. Fine, Hannah said, but why do you care so much? Susan quickened her pace. Because it's right. Hufflepuffs stand for justice, remember? But as they entered the greenhouse, Susan knew it was more than justice. Her eyes found Harry automatically, standing between Ron and Hermione, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders hunched as whispers followed him. He looked so much like that small, overwhelmed boy at the memorial that her chest ached. The library had always been Susan's sanctuary. Tonight, she had claimed her favorite corner table, hidden behind magical law shelves where few students ventured. Curfew approached, but she had a prefect's note from Hannah to cover her lateness. Susan dipped her quill, carefully composing a letter to her aunt. She couldn't directly mention Umbridge's blood quill, the mail was being watched, but Amelia would understand her coded references to historical disciplinary methods and potential violations of Educational Decree 8 of 1893. The sound of a book thumping down made her jump. Harry Potter stood at the next table, pulling out a chair. He hadn't noticed her, absorbed in whatever research had brought him to this deserted corner. His tie hung loose, hair standing in all directions like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Susan held her breath, watching him flip through a massive tome on defensive charms. His left hand absently rubbed his right, where she knew those cruel marks were carved. Without thinking, she pulled a small tin from her bag and approached his table. That helps with the pain, she said, placing it beside his book. Harry startled, wand half-drawn before he recognized her. Susan. Sorry, I didn't see you there. It's Murtlap essence, she continued, nodding toward the tin. For your hand. His eyes widened, then narrowed with suspicion. My hand's fine. It's not. And you're not the first student she's used that quill on. Harry stared at her for a long moment, then his shoulders sagged. How did you know? My aunt heads the DMLE. Blood quills are restricted Class B dark objects, only authorized for binding magical contracts. Susan sat across from him. Definitely not approved for detention. Harry unscrewed the tin, sniffing the yellowish paste inside. Won't help if I have to go back tomorrow. You have another detention? All week. His smile was bitter. Apparently I haven't learned my lesson about spreading nasty, attention-seeking lies. Susan clenched her fists beneath the table. It's illegal, what she's doing. Yeah, well, add it to the list. He tentatively applied some paste to his hand, then sighed with relief. This is brilliant. Thanks. I can make more. Harry studied her with those startling green eyes. Why are you helping me? Most of Hufflepuff thinks I'm Cedric's killer or a raving lunatic. Most of Hufflepuff is wrong. Susan felt her cheeks warming. I believe you. About everything. His expression transformed, suspicion melting into something vulnerable and surprised. Why? Susan considered her answer carefully. Because I've watched you for years. Because I know you're honest to a fault. Because I've had a crush on you since I was 10. Because it makes sense, she said instead. The Ministry's denial is too aggressive. My aunt says, she stopped abruptly, glancing around. This isn't the place. Harry leaned forward. Your aunt. Amelia Bones. Susan nodded. She can't say much, but she's asking questions at the Ministry. For the first time, a real smile appeared on Harry's face. That's more than most adults are doing. Madame Pants appeared at the end of the aisle, glaring pointedly at the clock. I should go, Susan gathered her things. Use the Murtlap after each detention. It'll prevent scarring. Susan, Harry called softly as she turned to leave. Would you? I mean, some of us are thinking about proper defense lessons, since Umbridge won't teach anything useful. Would you be interested? Susan's heart raced. Yes. Absolutely. Brilliant. I'll let you know details soon. She nodded and hurried away, her face burning. After 4 years of watching Harry Potter from a distance, he'd finally noticed her. The hogshead smelled of goats and stale beer. Susan sat between Hannah and Ernie, trying not to appear too eager as more students filtered into the dingy pub. When Harry arrived with Ron and Hermione, his eyes briefly met hers, and he gave a small nod. "This is mad," Hannah whispered. "We'll all be expelled if Umbridge finds out." "Only if someone talks," Susan whispered back, giving Zacharias Smith a pointed look. She'd insisted on bringing him despite his skepticism, better to have him where they could watch him. Hermione's awkward speech about learning proper defense drew mutters of agreement, but the mood shifted when Zacharias demanded proof of you-know-who's return. Susan winced as Harry's face darkened. "I'm not talking about Cedric," Harry said flatly. "So if that's why you're here, clear out now." Zacharias persisted. "All Dumbledore told us was that you-know-who killed Cedric and you brought his body back. Details seem pretty scarce, because watching a friend murdered isn't something you put in a press release," Susan interrupted, surprising herself again. The pub went quiet as everyone turned toward her. "My uncle, aunt, and cousins were murdered in the First War." The Ministry classified the details to prevent panic. "Truth is, they didn't want people knowing how vicious the attacks were." Harry stared at her with an unreadable expression. "Look," she continued, addressing the group, "you can believe the Ministry's rubbish or you can learn to protect yourselves. But don't ask Harry to relive trauma for your curiosity." After that, the meeting proceeded more smoothly. When Susan signed Hermione's parchment, she noticed Harry watching her. "Thanks," he said quietly as people began dispersing. "For what you said." Susan shrugged. "I just told the truth. Your family." He started, then seemed unsure how to continue. "It was a long time ago." Susan glanced at Hannah waiting by the door. "I should go." Harry nodded. "First meeting will be soon." As Susan left with the other Hufflepuffs, Ernie's lecture about prefect responsibilities washed over her. All she could think about was the way Harry had looked at her, not with pity, but with understanding. The room of requirement became Susan's favorite place at Hogwarts. 3 times a week, Dumbledore's army gathered to learn real defense under Harry's guidance. Susan had expected him to be knowledgeable, but she hadn't anticipated what a natural teacher he would be. "The key to a shield charm is intent," Harry explained, walking between pairs practicing. "You're not just saying words, you're willing a barrier into existence." Susan focused, trying to block Hannah's jinx for the 5th time. "Protego." The spell fizzled weakly as Hannah's stinging hex connected with her shoulder. "Sorry." Hannah winced. "It's fine," Susan rubbed her arm. "I'm rubbish at this." "No, you're not," Harry appeared beside them. "You're overthinking it." "May I?" He positioned himself across from Susan. "Cast your shield, and I'll send a mild jinx." Susan took a deep breath. "Protego." Harry's jinx shattered her shield instantly. "You're hesitating," he said. "Like you don't believe it will work." "It hasn't yet," she admitted. "Okay, different approach." Harry moved beside her. "Close your eyes." Susan complied, suddenly very aware of his proximity. "Think of something you want to protect," Harry said softly. "Not an object, a person, a memory, something that matters." Susan immediately thought of her aunt, the only family she had left. "Now imagine that thing is right behind you," Harry continued. "The spell is coming. Nothing exists except your need to keep it safe." Susan felt her magic respond, warming beneath her skin. "Protego," she shouted. The shield erupted from her wand with unexpected force, expanding outward in a shimmering dome. Hannah's jinx dissolved against it. Brilliant. Harry's grin was contagious. That's exactly right. Pride flooded through Susan. I did it. You just needed the right motivation. Harry's eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Keep practicing with Hannah. As he moved to help Neville, Susan caught Hermione watching them with a speculative expression. Later, as the session ended, Susan lingered to help collect cushions from the stunning practice. You've improved a lot, Harry commented, stacking books on a shelf. Thanks to you. Susan smiled. You're a really good teacher, Harry. He looked embarrassed but pleased. I just show people what I've had to learn the hard way. Well, it makes a difference. Susan hesitated, then added, I told my aunt about the DA in my last letter. Not directly, of course, but she understood. Harry paused. Is that safe? With Umbridge reading mail? We have a code. She was pleased, said practical defense education is essential right now. Your aunt sounds brilliant. She is. Susan grinned. She also mentioned that Umbridge has numerous departmental violations pending review. Harry's eyes lit up. Really? The wheels of bureaucracy turn slowly, but Aunt Amelia knows how to grease them. For a moment, they simply smiled at each other. Then Hermione called from the door, reminding Harry about curfew. Coming, he answered before turning back to Susan. Thanks for telling me. It helps, knowing there's someone on our side at the ministry. You've got more allies than you realize, Harry. Susan gathered her courage. Some of us have always believed in you. The look of genuine surprise on his face broke her heart a little. December transformed Hogwarts with frost-laced windows and towering Christmas trees. The last DA meeting before holidays had just concluded, and Susan was practicing stunning spells with Neville when Harry approached them. Great progress, both of you, he said. Neville, your aim's really improved. Neville beamed. Thanks to you and Susan. She's been helping me practice between meetings. Harry raised an eyebrow at Susan. Have you? That's brilliant. Susan felt her cheeks warm. Just basic drills. Nothing fancy. Still, that's exactly what the DA is about, helping each other. As Neville excused himself to speak with Luna, Harry lingered. He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. I wanted to ask, he finally said, what are your holiday plans? Staying with Aunt Amelia at Bones Manor, Susan replied. It's just us, so it's usually quiet. You're going to the Weasleys. A shadow crossed Harry's face. That was the plan, but with Mr. Weasley's accident, I'm not sure anymore. Susan had heard rumors about Arthur Weasley being injured, but details were scarce. You could. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. You could come to Bones Manor. If the Weasleys can't have you. Harry's eyes widened. What? For Christmas, Susan clarified, her heart pounding. Aunt Amelia wouldn't mind. She's actually mentioned wanting to meet you properly. That's really kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. It wouldn't be an imposition. Susan gathered her Hufflepuff courage. It would be nice, actually. Like I said, it's usually just us. Harry studied her with an unreadable expression. I'll keep it in mind, if plans change. Thanks, Susan. Later that night, Susan wrote to her aunt explaining everything, Arthur Weasley's mysterious injury, Harry's uncertain holiday plans, and her impulsive invitation. 3 days later, Amelia's response arrived. Harry Potter is welcome in our home anytime, her aunt wrote. His safety is paramount, so arrangements would need Dumbledore's approval. I've already contacted him. Susan read the letter twice, her hands trembling slightly. She hadn't actually expected anything to come of her invitation. At breakfast the next morning, Harry slid onto the bench beside her at the Hufflepuff table, causing Hannah to choke on her pumpkin juice. "Morning," he said casually, ignoring the stares from the surrounding Hufflepuffs. "Got a minute?" Susan nodded, too surprised to speak. "Walk with me." Harry stood, clearly uncomfortable with their audience. Outside the Great Hall, Harry ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. "Dumbledore spoke to me last night. About Christmas." "Oh. He said you and your aunt offered, that I could stay with you." Susan nodded. "The invitation stands. The Weasleys are going to be at." Harry glanced around and lowered his voice. "They'll be somewhere secure. I was planning to join them." Of course, Susan tried to hide her disappointment. "That makes sense. But Dumbledore thinks I should split the holiday. First half with them, second half at Bones Manor." Harry looked uncertain. "If that's still all right." Susan's heart leapt. "Absolutely. Aunt Amelia will be pleased. Dumbledore said it would be strategically advantageous for me to strengthen connections with the DMLE." Harry rolled his eyes. "Always 10 steps ahead, isn't he?" "That's Dumbledore," Susan agreed. "But I'm just happy you're coming. As a friend, not a strategy." Harry's smile reached his eyes. "Thanks, Susan. It'll be nice to have a normal Christmas for once." As Harry walked away, Susan felt a tap on her shoulder. Hannah stood there, eyebrows raised to her hairline. "Harry Potter is spending Christmas with you," she demanded. "When were you planning to mention that?" Susan grinned. "Right about now." Christmas at Grimmauld Place was a subdued affair. Though Arthur Weasley was recovering well from the snake attack, the circumstances cast a shadow over the festivities. Harry found himself watching the clock, anticipating the second part of his holiday. "Are you sure about this, mate?" Ron asked as Harry packed his trunk. "Spending Christmas with the head of magical law enforcement sounds dead boring." Harry shrugged. "Dumbledore thinks it's a good idea." "It is a good idea," Hermione interjected, passing Harry a stack of folded shirts. "Madam Bones is one of the few ministry officials who's been fair to Harry. And Susan's nice." Ron waggled his eyebrows. "Susan's more than nice." "Have you seen her? Finish that sentence and I'll hex you," Hermione warned. Harry felt his face heating up. "It's not like that. Susan's just a friend." "A friend who invited you home for Christmas," Ron pointed out. "Because she knows I've had a rubbish year." Harry stuffed the last of his clothes into the trunk. "Anyway, it's just for 3 days." 3 hours later, Harry stood beside Dumbledore in a snow-covered lane, facing wrought iron gates emblazoned with the Bones family crest. "Madam Bones has extended her home's protections to recognize you," Dumbledore explained. "Simply place your hand on the gate." Harry did as instructed. The iron warmed beneath his palm, and the gates swung open to reveal a handsome manor house surrounded by winter gardens. Susan was waiting at the door, her face lighting up when she saw him. Something in Harry's chest tightened at her genuine welcome. "You made it," she exclaimed, then composed herself. "I mean, hello, Professor Dumbledore." "Hello, Harry." Amelia Bones appeared behind her niece, a formidable witch with a monocle and the same strawberry blonde hair as Susan, though cropped short. "Mr. Potter," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Bones Manor." After Dumbledore's departure and a brief tour, Harry found himself in a comfortable sitting room, a mug of hot chocolate in hand as Susan showed him family photos. "That's Uncle Edgar," she pointed to a laughing man with his arm around a pregnant woman. "And Aunt Margaret. They were killed when I was a baby." "I'm sorry," Harry said quietly. "It was Death Eaters," Susan continued. "They targeted my family because the Boneses fought against you-know-who openly." Harry glanced toward the doorway where Amelia had disappeared. "Your aunt must have been devastated. She raised me after my parents died in a separate attack." Susan's voice was matter-of-fact. We understand each other, Harry. Loss shapes you. Harry stared at her, really seeing Susan Bones for perhaps the first time. Not just as a classmate or DA member, but as someone who truly understood. It does, he agreed. But so does finding people who get it. Without explanation. Susan smiled softly. Exactly. Later that evening, Harry found himself alone with Amelia in her study while Susan prepared dinner. Susan speaks very highly of you, Amelia said, studying him over her monocle. Harry shifted uncomfortably. She's been a great friend this year. One of the few who believed me from the start. The Bones family values truth, Mr. Potter. Even uncomfortable truth. Amelia sipped her tea. Which is why I want to hear your account of last June. In your own words, without profit interference. Harry hesitated. I've told this story a lot, Madam Bones. Not to me. Her voice softened slightly. And I may be in a position to actually do something with the information. For the next hour, Harry recounted everything, the graveyard, Cedric's murder, Voldemort's resurrection, the circle of Death Eaters. Amelia took notes, asking occasional clarifying questions but never doubting his testimony. Thank you, she said when he finished. That corroborates much of my independent investigation. Harry straightened. You've been investigating? Unofficially. Fudge has blocked formal inquiry, but I answer to magical law, not political convenience. Amelia's expression was grim. War is coming, Mr. Potter. The Ministry will be forced to acknowledge it soon. Will you be safe? When they realize you believe me? Amelia smiled thinly. Concern for my safety? Susan was right about you. She rose, signaling the end of their conversation. We Boneses have survived many dark times, Mr. Potter. We'll weather this one too. The next day brought unexpected joy. Susan taught Harry to ice skate on the frozen pond behind the manor, both of them bundled against the winter chill. I'm rubbish at this, Harry laughed, arms windmilling as he nearly fell again. You're doing fine for a beginner, Susan grabbed his hands to steady him. Better than I did my first time. Harry doubted that, but appreciated the encouragement. Did your aunt teach you? My dad, actually. Susan's smile turned wistful. Before he died. It's one of my few memories of him. They skated in comfortable silence after that, Susan never letting go of his hand. That night, they sat before the fireplace playing wizard's chess. Harry was losing spectacularly. You're worse than Ron, Susan teased as her queen demolished his knight. Ron's a chess prodigy. I'm just cannon fodder. Susan laughed, the firelight catching in her hair. Harry found himself staring. What? She asked, noticing his gaze. Nothing. Just. Harry hesitated. Thank you. For inviting me here. You're welcome anytime, Harry. Susan's voice was soft. I mean that. An unexpected warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in months, Harry felt something like peace. January brought freezing rain and intensified DA meetings. With OWLs approaching and Umbridge's increasing tyranny, the stakes felt higher every day. Expecto Patronum. Susan concentrated with all her might, producing a wisp of silver vapor. That's it. Harry encouraged. You're getting closer. Think of something powerful, your happiest memory. Susan closed her eyes, focusing on the memory of Harry skating with her, his hand warm in hers despite the cold. Expecto Patronum. This time, the silver mist coalesced into a distinct four-legged shape before dissolving. Susan. You nearly had it. Harry's excitement matched her own. What memory did you use? She blushed. Christmas. Ice skating. Something flickered in Harry's eyes. That was a good day. Around them, other DA members struggled with their patron uses. Only Hermione had produced a full corporeal form. Once more, Harry urged. "You're so close." Susan raised her wand, focusing again on that perfect winter day, adding the warmth she'd felt watching Harry laugh freely for perhaps the first time all year. Expecto Patronum. Silver light erupted from her wand, forming a sleek, bounding shape, a badger, racing playfully around her in spiraling circles. A badger. Harry grinned. Perfect for a Hufflepuff. Susan watched her Patronus in amazement. "I did it. I knew you could." The pride in Harry's voice made her heart swell. Across the room, Hermione was watching them with that same speculative expression she'd worn before Christmas. When Harry moved on to help Neville, she approached Susan. "Your Patronus is lovely," Hermione said casually. "Thanks. I'm surprised I managed it." "I'm not." Hermione's eyes were knowing. "Your happy memory must be quite powerful." Susan felt her cheeks warm. "It was just a good day." "With Harry?" Hermione asked bluntly. "How did you? I notice things." Hermione's tone softened. "He needs friends right now. Real ones." "I know." Susan watched Harry demonstrating the wand movement to Luna. "That's all I'm trying to be." Hermione studied her for a long moment. "I think you might be exactly what he needs, Susan Bones." Before Susan could respond, the door to the room of requirement burst open. Dobby the house elf appeared, his tennis ball eyes wide with terror. "She is coming," he squeaked. Umbridge. Chaos erupted. Harry shouted for everyone to run, and the DA scattered. Susan grabbed Hannah's arm, pulling her toward the Hufflepuff dorms. "This way," she urged, taking a hidden passage Cedric had once shown her. They made it safely, but others weren't so lucky. By breakfast, everyone knew, Marietta Edgecombe had betrayed them, Dumbledore had fled, and Harry faced expulsion. Susan didn't see Harry for 2 days. Then, during a study period in the library, he slipped into the chair across from her, looking exhausted. "Harry. Are you all right? We've been so worried." "I'm not expelled," he said quietly. Dumbledore took the blame. Susan reached for his hand without thinking. "What can I do?" Harry turned his palm up, squeezing her fingers. "Just this. Being here." They sat in silence, hands linked beneath the table, while around them students whispered about Dumbledore's dramatic escape. "I've written to Aunt Amelia," Susan whispered. "About Umbridge becoming headmistress. About the Inquisitorial Squad. Will she help?" "She's trying. The educational decrees have precedent, technically, but the way they're being implemented." Susan grimaced. "It's complicated politics." Harry nodded tiredly. "Everything is, these days." "We'll keep practicing," Susan promised. "Even without the DA. They can't stop us learning to defend ourselves." For the first time since Dumbledore's departure, Harry smiled. "No, they can't." The following weeks proved Susan right. Though the DA couldn't meet openly, small groups gathered secretly to practice. Susan organized Hufflepuff sessions in their common room, where the Inquisitorial Squad couldn't enter. One evening in early February, she found a folded note tucked inside her herbology textbook. Astronomy Tower. Midnight. Bring your wand. H. Susan's heart raced as she slipped out of the dormitory under cover of darkness. The castle was eerily silent, her footsteps echoing despite her care. The astronomy tower's door stood ajar, moonlight spilling through. Harry waited by the parapet, his silhouette outlined against the starry sky. "You came," he said, turning to her with a smile. "Of course." Susan approached, shivering slightly in the night air. "What's this about?" "Two things." Harry produced a crumpled prophet from his pocket. "First, have you seen this?" Susan scanned the headline, Ministry warns of breakout from Azkaban. 10 Death Eaters, she whispered, scanning the article. Including Bellatrix Lestrange. They're blaming Sirius Black, Harry said, his voice tight. It's rubbish. Voldemort freed them. Susan returned the paper, her hands trembling slightly. Aunt Amelia will be in danger. Lestrange killed Uncle Edgar. Harry stepped closer. I'm sorry, Susan. I shouldn't have, no, she interrupted. I needed to know. Knowledge is protection. She took a deep breath. What was the second thing? To her surprise, Harry looked nervous. It's Valentine's Day this weekend. Susan blinked. Yes. There's a Hogsmeade trip. I know. Harry ran a hand through his hair. Would you want to go? With me? Susan stared at him, certain she'd misheard. With you? As a date, Harry clarified, looking increasingly uncomfortable. If you'd rather not, yes. Susan interrupted. Yes, I'd love to. Relief flooded Harry's face. Brilliant. That's brilliant. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, before both speaking at once. I should probably, it's getting late, they laughed, tension broken. We should head back before Filch catches us, Harry said. As they crept down the spiral staircase, Susan felt like her heart might burst from her chest. After all these years of watching Harry Potter from afar, somehow he was watching back. Hogsmeade glittered with enchanted Valentine decorations. Heart-shaped lanterns floated above the high street, and shop windows displayed animated cupids shooting arrows at passers-by. Susan waited outside the Three Broomsticks, ignoring Hannah's teasing comments as her friend disappeared inside with Ernie and Justin. When Harry appeared, he was alone, an unusual sight given his typical flanking by Ron and Hermione. Hi, he said, looking slightly breathless. Sorry I'm late. Cho Chang cornered me. Susan's stomach twisted. Everyone knew Cho had fancied Harry. Oh. She wanted to know why I wasn't going to Madame Poudafoute's with her. Harry looked uncomfortable. Apparently there was some assumption. We can go there if you'd prefer, Susan offered, trying to keep her voice neutral. Harry looked horrified. God, no. Have you seen that place? It's like drowning in pink frills. He grinned sheepishly. Unless you want to. Susan laughed with relief. Definitely not. How about the Three Broomsticks? Perfect. Inside, they found a small table in the corner. Harry insisted on buying butterbeers, returning with frothy mugs and a plate of chips to share. So, he said, settling across from her, this is weird, right? Susan nearly choked on her drink. What? Not weird bad, Harry clarified quickly. Just, different. Us. On a date. Is it that surprising? Susan ventured. Harry considered this. Kind of. I mean, we've been friends all year, but I never thought. I didn't realize you might see me that way. The moment stretched between them. Susan took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Harry, I've had a crush on you since I was 10 years old. His eyes widened comically. What? I know that sounds mad. Susan stared into her butterbeer. I saw you at the War Memorial when we were little. You looked so lost, and I wanted to know you. She risked a glance up. Then at Hogwarts, you were always rushing into danger or surrounded by Ron and Hermione. I never knew how to approach you. Harry looked stunned. All this time? Susan nodded, mortified but determined to be honest. I kept a scrapbook of prophet articles about you. Pathetic, I know. To her surprise, Harry burst out laughing. It's not funny, she protested. No, it's not that, Harry wheezed. It's just, all those bloody profit articles. The ones this year have been awful. I stopped collecting after Rita Skeeter's Triwizard rubbish, Susan admitted. But I still have the old ones. Harry reached across the table, taking her hand. I'd like to see them sometime. Really? Yeah. His smile was warm. I'd like to see how the world saw me before it all went mad. They spent hours talking, about classes, about the DA, about their childhoods. Susan found herself telling Harry stories about growing up with Aunt Amelia, about learning politics at the dinner table and defense spells in the garden. She sounds amazing, Harry said. Your aunt. She is. Terrifying but fair. Susan stirred her third butterbeer. What about your family? You never talk about them. Harry's expression darkened. Not much to say. The Dursleys hate magic and they hate me. That's awful. He shrugged. It's just how it is. I've got the Weasleys now. And other people who care about you, Susan said quietly. Their eyes met. Slowly, Harry leaned across the table. The blast shook the entire pub. Screams erupted from the high street as patrons rushed to the windows. Death Eaters, someone shouted. Harry was on his feet instantly, wand drawn. Stay here, he ordered, already moving toward the door. Susan followed, ignoring his protest. Not a chance, Potter. Outside was chaos. 3 masked figures were firing curses at fleeing students while shopkeepers attempted to shield the youngest. Susan recognized Draco Malfoy's father by his distinctive platinum hair, even behind his mask. Potter. Lucius Malfoy snarled, spotting them. The Dark Lord will be pleased. Harry pushed Susan behind him. Run. Get help. Protego. Susan cast instead, blocking a curse aimed at Harry's back from another Death Eater. What followed was a blur of spellfire and shouted curses. Susan and Harry fought back to back, using everything they practiced in the DA. When reinforcements arrived, Professors McGonagall and Flitwick, followed by several Aurors, the Death Eaters disapparated. Is anyone hurt? McGonagall demanded, her face pale. Harry had a cut above his eye. Susan's robes were singed from a near miss with a blasting curse. But around them, several students lay injured or unconscious. Bones, a familiar voice called. Aunt Amelia strode through the chaos, her Aurors securing the scene. I'm all right, Susan assured her, though her hands were shaking. Amelia surveyed the damage, her expression grave. This wasn't random. They were looking for someone. Her eyes fixed on Harry, who was helping Neville to his feet. They called him by name, Susan confirmed quietly. Lucius Malfoy. Amelia's monocle glinted. Interesting. Lucius claims to have been at the Ministry all afternoon. I'll be sure to inform him his doppelganger is attacking children. As Hogwarts staff organized the students' return to the castle, Harry found his way back to Susan's side. You should have run, he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern mixed with something like admiration. Hufflepuffs don't abandon friends, Susan replied simply. Is that what I am? A friend? Harry's gaze was intense despite his exhaustion. Susan stepped closer. You know you're more than that. Before she could lose her nerve, she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, Harry froze. Then his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer as he kissed her back. Mr. Potter. Miss Bones. Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the moment. To the carriages, immediately. They broke apart, breathless and flushed. Not exactly how I planned our first date to end, Harry murmured. Susan smiled despite everything. Actually, fighting Death Eaters seems exactly your style. Harry laughed, taking her hand as they joined the stream of students returning to the castle. Behind them, Susan caught sight of her aunt watching with an unreadable expression. When their eyes met, Amelia gave a small nod, of approval or warning, Susan couldn't tell. Either way, everything had changed. Susan Bones had finally stopped watching Harry Potter from afar. Now she stood beside him, facing whatever came next. Chapter 2, The Truth in the Shadows. News of the Hogsmeade attack exploded across Wizarding Britain. The Daily Prophet's headline screamed, "Sirius Black leads Death Eater assault on students," conveniently ignoring witness accounts identifying Lucius Malfoy. "This is rubbish," Harry said, tossing the newspaper aside at breakfast. "Complete rubbish." Susan slid onto the bench beside him, ignoring the raised eyebrows from nearby Gryffindors. Since their Valentine's Day kiss, she'd stopped pretending the house tables mattered. "Aunt Amelia's furious," she whispered. Fudge blocked her from questioning Malfoy. "Called it harassment of a respected ministry benefactor." Harry's jaw tightened. "Of course he did. There's more." Susan glanced around before continuing. 3 junior Aurors who supported her investigation were reassigned to Azkaban duty. Hermione leaned forward. "They're silencing anyone who questions the official story. Like they've done with Harry all year," Ron added through a mouthful of eggs. Susan nodded grimly. "Aunt Amelia says to be extra careful. She thinks Umbridge has been given new powers to maintain order after the attack." As if summoned by her name, Dolores Umbridge tapped her goblet, rising from the staff table. The great hall fell silent. Due to recent security concerns, she simpered, Educational Decree No. 28 has been implemented. All student groups, associations, and meetings are henceforth disbanded unless approved personally by myself. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Additionally, Umbridge continued, her girlish voice hardening, students seen conspiring in groups larger than 3 will face immediate disciplinary action. For your safety, of course. Her bulging eyes swept the room, lingering on Harry. That includes inappropriate inter-house fraternization, she added with pointed sweetness. Susan felt Harry stiffen beside her. She can't do that, Hermione whispered furiously. She can't dictate who sits where at meals. Watch her, Harry muttered. She's just getting started. He was right. By dinner, new notices plastered the corridors. Boys and girls were to maintain 6 inches of space between them at all times, students were to travel directly between classes without lingering, all mail would be inspected for contraband and seditious materials. It's like a prison, Ginny complained in the library, where they'd gathered to study, carefully spaced in 2s and 3s at separate tables to avoid Umbridge's new rules. It's going to get worse, Harry said quietly. Voldemort's out there recruiting, and Fudge is making it easier by keeping everyone in the dark. Susan watched his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. They hadn't had a proper moment alone since Hogsmeade, with Umbridge's inquisitorial squad patrolling the corridors. "We need to keep the DA going," Neville said, surprising everyone with his firmness. "Now more than ever." Harry nodded. "Tomorrow night. We'll spread the word carefully." As they left the library in carefully staggered departures, Susan found herself walking beside Harry through the darkening corridor. "You look exhausted," she said softly. Harry gave a wry smile. "Not sleeping great. Nightmares?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Same one, over and over. A long corridor, a door. Have you told Dumbledore? He's avoiding me." Harry's voice was bitter. "Barely looks at me anymore." Susan touched his arm. "Maybe Aunt Amelia, Potter." "Bones." Draco Malfoy's voice echoed from behind them. The Slytherin prefect approached with Crabbe and Goyle flanking him. "What's this? Inter-house fraternization? That's against Educational Decree 28. Harry's hand moved to his wand. "We're walking to our dormitories, Malfoy. Nothing against that." Draco's smile was nasty. "Together? Holding hands? I think that warrants detention." We weren't holding hands, Susan said evenly. Not what I saw. Draco's eyes gleamed. Father says your aunt is making trouble at the ministry, Bones. You might want to reconsider your associations before things get unpleasant. The threat hung in the air. Is that what your father said before or after he attacked students in Hogsmeade? Harry asked coldly. Draco's face flushed. My father was at the ministry all day. Witnesses confirmed it. Yeah, witnesses paid to lie. Harry stepped forward. Just like you're lying now. 10 points from Gryffindor for disrespect, Draco snapped. And detention for both of you with Professor Umbridge. Tomorrow night at 7. As Malfoy strutted away, Susan groaned. Tomorrow's the DA meeting. He knows that, Harry said grimly. Or suspects. We need to reschedule. How? We can't exactly send owls with Umbridge watching the mail. Harry ran a hand through his hair. I'll figure something out. Don't worry. Before they parted, he squeezed her hand quickly. Be careful, Susan. Malfoy wasn't just posturing, they're targeting your aunt, which means you're in danger too. I'm not afraid of Draco Malfoy. It's not Malfoy I'm worried about, Harry said darkly. It's who he reports to. The detention with Umbridge was exactly what Susan expected, hours of writing lines with the blood quill. Each stroke carved the words into her skin, I must not break rules. Harry sat beside her, his own quill scratching out I must not tell lies for the 100th time that year. His face betrayed nothing, but Susan saw the white-knuckled grip on his quill. Miss Bones, Umbridge said sweetly, breaking the silence. I'm disappointed. Such a respectable family. Your aunt must be distressed by your poor choices. Susan kept writing, refusing to engage. Mr. Potter is a troubled young man, Umbridge continued. Mentally unstable, prone to dangerous delusions. Surely your aunt wouldn't approve of such companionship. My aunt, Susan said carefully, believes in judging people by their actions, not ministry propaganda. Umbridge's smile tightened. Your aunt's judgment has been questioned recently. Her position is not as secure as it once was. Susan's quill paused. Is that a threat, Professor? Merely an observation, dear. Umbridge sipped her tea. The minister values loyalty. Those who demonstrate it are rewarded. Those who don't. Face your blood quill. Harry interrupted, green eyes flashing. Get transferred to Azkaban duty. Or maybe visited by Death Eaters like Malfoy. Umbridge's face hardened. That's another week of detention, Mr. Potter. And for you as well, Miss Bones, for your insolence. When they were finally released past midnight, Harry pulled Susan into an alcove, checking her hand. It's not too bad, she said, though the cut stung fiercely. Harry's expression was murderous. I'll kill her. No, you won't. Susan extracted the small tin of Murtlap essence from her bag. Here, use this. As they applied the soothing paste to each other's wounds, Harry sighed. I'm sorry I got you into this. I got myself into it, Susan corrected. And I'd do it again. Harry studied her face in the dim wandlight. Why? You know why. She met his gaze steadily. Because I believe in you. Because someone has to stand up to her. Because she stopped herself. Too soon. Harry's eyes softened. He leaned forward, pressing his lips gently to hers. Unlike their first kiss amid Hogsmeade chaos, this one was soft, deliberate. We should get back, Susan whispered when they parted. Harry nodded, but neither moved. Tomorrow. Room of requirement. After dinner. The DA meeting. Just us. There's something I need to tell you. The room of requirement appeared as a cozy sitting room when Susan arrived, a fireplace crackling, comfortable armchairs, no training dummies in sight. Harry paced before the fire, tension radiating from him. "What's wrong?" Susan asked, closing the door behind her. "Everything," Harry said, running a hand through his hair. "Dumbledore, these dreams, Umbridge threatening you because of me." "Slow down." Susan took his hands, pulling him to sit beside her. "Start with the dreams." Harry took a deep breath. "They're not just nightmares. Dumbledore thinks Voldemort's sending them, that there's some kind of connection between us." Susan felt cold. "A connection? Through your scar?" "Maybe. Dumbledore made me take occlumency lessons with Snape to block him out." "Occlumency? That's incredibly advanced magic." Susan frowned. "And with Snape? Why not Dumbledore himself?" "Good question," Harry said bitterly. "One of many he won't answer." "How are the lessons going?" Harry laughed hollowly. "Terribly. Snape just attacks my mind repeatedly, calls me weak, and sends me away. The dreams are getting worse, not better." Susan squeezed his hands. "There must be other ways to learn occlumency. My aunt had to master it as part of Auror training. Could you ask her?" "Better than that." Susan released his hands and retrieved a small book from her bag. "I already did. She sent this." The slim volume was titled The Guarded Mind, An Introduction to Mental Defense. "It's not comprehensive," Susan explained, "but Aunt Amelia says it's how most beginners start. The exercises are more structured than have Snape attack your mind repeatedly." Harry took the book reverently. "This is brilliant, Susan. Thank you. We can practice together," she offered. "I've always wanted to learn occlumency too. Snape would kill me if he knew." "Snape doesn't need to know." Susan's smile was mischievous. "We've been running a secret defense group under Umbridge's nose for months. What's one more forbidden skill?" For the first time that evening, Harry's smile reached his eyes. "Have I told you lately that you're amazing?" "Not nearly enough," Susan teased. They spent the next hour working through the book's first chapter, practicing basic mental exercises, visualizing protective barriers, controlling breathing to calm the mind, organizing thoughts methodically. "The book says sorting memories can help build mental compartments," Susan read. "Try categorizing a day's events in chronological order, then by emotional impact." Harry closed his eyes, attempting the exercise. His face relaxed gradually as he worked. "This actually makes sense," he said, opening his eyes. "Snape just kept saying, 'Clear your mind,' without explaining how. Almost like he wanted you to fail," Susan mused. Harry's expression darkened. "Wouldn't surprise me. Let's try once more, then head back before curfew." Susan checked her watch. "Umbridge's patrols start in 30 minutes. As they packed up, Harry suddenly stiffened, pressing a hand to his scar. "Harry." Susan touched his arm. "What's wrong?" "He's angry," Harry whispered. "Voldemort. Something's not going according to plan." The casual way he spoke about sensing the Dark Lord's emotions chilled Susan to the bone. "All the more reason to master occlumency," she said, keeping her voice steady. Harry nodded, clearly trying to shake off the connection. "Tomorrow, same time." "Tomorrow," Susan agreed. "And Harry? Don't tell anyone about this. Not even Ron and Hermione, for now. If Umbridge finds out." "Our secret," Harry promised. "Just between us." For the next 2 weeks, they met nightly in the room of requirement, alternating between DA sessions and private occlumency practice. Susan proved a natural at mental defense, while Harry struggled but gradually improved. "You're not forcing it anymore," Susan observed one evening as Harry successfully repelled her tentative probe. The book had progressed them to basic mental contact after 10 days of preparation. "It's easier to picture a shield than to empty my mind completely," Harry admitted. "Like building something instead of becoming nothing. Everyone's different." Susan consulted the book. Aunt Amelia mentioned that in her note. Some visualize walls, others water or mirrors. I've been imagining a Patronus, Harry said. Not the stag itself, but the feeling of casting it. Like pushing happiness outward. Susan nodded. That's perfect, actually. Using magic you're already strong with. They practiced for another hour before collapsing onto the couch the room had provided, exhausted but pleased with their progress. Your turn, Harry said, opening his mind slightly to Susan's gentle probe. She entered carefully, experiencing the strange sensation of another's consciousness, flashes of memories, emotions, sensations. A red-haired woman's laugh. Flying above the Quidditch pitch. The acrid smell of a burning diary. Then, suddenly, a dark corridor stretched before her mental vision. A black door at the end called to her, promising secrets, power. Susan pulled back with a gasp. What happened? Harry asked, concerned. I saw it, the corridor from your dreams. Susan's heart raced. It felt like it was pulling me in. Harry paled. That's exactly how it feels. Like something wants me to go through that door. Harry, this is serious. If I could feel it too, it's more than just dreams. But what is it? What does Voldemort want there? Susan hesitated. The door, it reminded me of something Aunt Amelia once mentioned. The Department of Mysteries at the Ministry. They have doors like that, black, plain, unmarked. The Department of Mysteries? Harry frowned. What would Voldemort want there? I don't know, but whatever it is, he's willing to plant it in your mind to get it. Susan grabbed his hands. We need to work harder on your occlumency. And you need to tell Dumbledore about this. Harry's expression hardened. Dumbledore won't see me. He barely looks at me in the Great Hall. Then write to him, send a Patronus, something. This is too important. I'll try, Harry promised, though he didn't sound hopeful. As they practiced more intensely over the following days, other matters grew increasingly complicated. The inquisitorial squad targeted Susan relentlessly, accidentally knocking her books in the corridor, whispering, "Blood traitor," as she passed, checking her mail before anyone else's. They're trying to isolate you, Hermione observed as Pansy Parkinson spilled pumpkin juice on Susan's homework. It's working, Susan admitted, watching Hannah and Ernie sitting further down the table. Her fellow Hufflepuffs hadn't abandoned her, but they'd created cautious distance as Umbridge's reign intensified. Only Neville remained steadfastly supportive, often partnering with Susan in classes when Harry couldn't. Gran says your aunt is one of the few with integrity left at the Ministry, he told her during herbology. Says if more were like Amelia Bones, you know who would never have gained power the first time. Susan smiled gratefully. Thanks, Neville. How's your stunning spell coming along? Better. I practiced with Harry yesterday. Almost knocked him down last time. Their conversation was interrupted by Professor Sprout calling for attention. The kindly herbology teacher had been noticeably reserved since Umbridge's inspection of her class, but today she looked positively grim. A moment, please, before you go. Sprout waited until the greenhouse quieted. I've been instructed to remind you that Educational Decree 31 forbids discussion of current events or politics in class settings. She adjusted her patched hat, a hint of rebellion in her eyes. However, what you discuss while tending your personal saprophyros plants is, of course, your own business. As they returned to their stations, Neville whispered, that's Sprout's way of telling us to keep talking, just quietly. Professor Sprout understands resistance takes many forms, Susan agreed. After class, Susan headed to the Ollery to send her weekly letter to Aunt Amelia. Their correspondence had grown increasingly coded as Umbridge's mail inspections intensified. She had just attached the parchment to a school owl when footsteps sounded on the stairs. She turned, expecting Harry, but found Draco Malfoy instead, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Sending love notes to Scarhead, Bones? Draco sneered. Susan kept her expression neutral. Just writing to my aunt. Your aunt? Draco's smile was unpleasant. How is Madame Bones? Still making trouble at the ministry? Still enforcing the law, Susan corrected, moving toward the door. Excuse me. Goyle blocked her path. Not so fast. Inspection first. Professor Umbridge already checked my mail this morning. Consider this a random spot check, Draco drawled, reaching for the owl. Susan raised her wand. That owl's already gone, Malfoy. Touch another and I'll hex you. Threatening a member of the Inquisitorial Squad. Draco tooted. That's detention, Bones. It's self-defense against unauthorized mail tampering, Susan countered. Even Umbridge's decrees don't allow students to intercept mail after official inspection. Draco's eyes narrowed. You think you're so clever. Just like your blood traitor aunt. My aunt, Susan said coldly, put your father's friends in Azkaban. I imagine that's the real reason you're here. Something dangerous flashed in Draco's eyes. You should be careful, Bones. Accidents happen all the time at Hogwarts. Especially to students who choose the wrong side. I'm on the side of truth, Malfoy. Something you wouldn't recognize if it performed a tap dance on your pointy face. Draco raised his wand, but another voice interrupted. Everything all right here? Harry stood in the doorway, Neville and Luna behind him. Perfect timing, Potter, Draco drawled. I was just explaining to your girlfriend the dangers of associating with lunatics and liars. Funny, Harry said, stepping forward. I was about to warn her about pointy-faced cowards who need 2 bodyguards to feel brave. Tension crackled between them. Susan moved to Harry's side, wand still raised. 4 against 3, Draco calculated aloud. But one's Longbottom and another's Loony Lovegood. Hardly counts. Want to test that theory? Neville asked with surprising steel in his voice. For a moment, it seemed Draco might actually fight. Then he smiled thinly. Professor Umbridge will be interested to hear about this little gathering. 5 students threatening a prefect. That's a week's detention, at least. He pushed past them, Crabbe and Goyle lumbering after. Are you okay? Harry asked once they'd gone. Susan nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. They were trying to intercept my letter to Aunt Amelia. It's gone already though, right? Neville asked. Yes, but that's not the point. They're specifically targeting my aunt now, not just you, Harry. What did you tell her in the letter? Harry asked quietly. Updates on Umbridge, mostly. And that we've been practicing, you know. Harry's eyes widened. A clemency? You wrote that down. In code, Susan assured him. I said we've been exploring meditation techniques to improve focus during exams. Still risky, Harry frowned. Aunt Amelia needs to know you're making progress. She's worried about the connection. Luna, who had been examining the owls with dreamy interest, turned suddenly. Connection? You mean with Raxperts? Susan exchanged a glance with Harry. Something like that, Luna. My father says Raxperts are drawn to negative energy, Luna continued serenely. That's why the ministry's full of them. All that lying creates a feast. Harry smiled despite the tension. Your father's right about that much. As they left the Ollery, Susan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the March air. Draco's threat hadn't been empty, the danger was escalating for everyone associated with Harry. 2 nights later, Susan sat beside Harry in the room of requirement, reviewing his latest occlumency attempt. You're definitely improving, she encouraged. I couldn't see the corridor this time. Harry rubbed his scar absently. It's still there, though. I feel it pulling every night. But you're resisting better. The book says, a loud crack interrupted them. Dobby the house elf appeared, trembling from ears to mismatched socks. Harry Potter, he squeaked. Dobby has come to warn you. Harry jumped to his feet. Warn me? About what? She knows. She is coming. Susan's blood ran cold. Umbridge? She knows about the DA. Dobby nodded frantically. Miss Edgecombe told her. They are coming now. Harry swore. We need to warn the others. The meeting starts in 15 minutes. No time. Dobby wailed. They is already on their way. Susan grabbed Harry's arm. We have to go. Now. But the others, we'll warn who we can, but if Umbridge catches you here. Susan didn't need to finish the sentence. With Fudge backing her, Umbridge could have Harry expelled instantly. Harry hesitated only a second before nodding. Dobby, warn anyone coming for the DA meeting. Tell them to go back to their common rooms immediately. Yes, Harry Potter. The elf vanished with another crack. Susan pulled out the DA galleon Hermione had enchanted. I'll change the message. Don't come. You knows. They rushed from the room, taking separate directions by silent agreement, Harry toward Gryffindor Tower, Susan toward the main staircase to intercept any Hufflepuffs or Ravenclaws. She made it to the 4th floor when a stunner whizzed past her ear. Stop right there, Bones. Pansy Parkinson's voice rang out. Susan ducked behind a suit of armor, firing back a leglocker curse that missed by inches. Expelliarmus. Another voice, Warrington, a Slytherin 7th year. Susan dodged, but a third spell caught her from behind. Incarcerus. Ropes wrapped around her body, sending her crashing to the floor. Draco Malfoy emerged from the shadows, twirling his wand. Well, well. Caught in the act of running from your illegal meeting. His smile was triumphant. Professor Umbridge will be pleased. Pansy yanked Susan to her feet. Where's Potter? I don't know what you're talking about, Susan said calmly, despite her racing heart. I was heading to the library to study for OWLs. With your wand drawn? Draco laughed. Save it for Umbridge. She's got Veritaserum ready. Susan's stomach dropped. Veritaserum would force her to reveal everything, the DA, their occlumency practice, the communications with Aunt Amelia. Draco and Pansy dragged her toward the headmaster's office. As they passed the Transfiguration corridor, Susan caught sight of McGonagall exiting her classroom. Professor, she called desperately. McGonagall turned, her eyes widening at the sight of Susan bound in magical ropes. Mr. Malfoy, Miss Parkinson, explain yourselves immediately, she demanded, striding toward them. Ministry business, Professor, Draco said smugly. By order of the High Inquisitor. I was unaware that students were authorized to restrain other students with potentially dangerous binding spells, McGonagall said coldly. Release Miss Bones at once. We can't do that, Professor, Pansy simpered. She's being brought in for questioning about Potter's illegal organization. McGonagall's lips thinned to nearly nothing. Then I shall accompany you. Miss Bones is a member of my house. Hufflepuff, actually, Draco corrected. All students are under my care as deputy headmistress, McGonagall snapped. Now move along, if you insist on this charade. Her presence was small comfort as they approached the gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's, now Umbridge's, office. The scene inside made Susan's heart sink further. Harry stood rigidly beside Dumbledore's desk. Behind him, Kingsley Shacklebolt and another Auror flanked a nervous-looking Cornelius Fudge. Umbridge sat in Dumbledore's chair, a look of malicious triumph on her toad-like face. Percy Weasley hovered nearby with a quill poised over parchment. In the corner, Marietta Edgecombe sobbed quietly, her face hidden in her hands. Ah, another one, Umbridge said sweetly. Miss Bones. How appropriate. Fudge looked uncomfortable. Amelia Bones's niece? Dolores, I'm not sure, the law applies to everyone, Minister, Umbridge interrupted. Even relatives of ministry officials. McGonagall stepped forward. What exactly is happening here, Dolores? Justice, Minerva, Umbridge simpered. These students formed an illegal organization against Educational Decree No. 24. Miss Edgecombe has confirmed it. All eyes turned to Marietta, who raised her face, revealing the word sneak spelled in purple pustules across her forehead. And Mr. Potter? McGonagall asked. Was the leader, Umbridge said triumphantly. We have the membership list. Dumbledore's army, they called themselves. Fudge thrust the parchment toward McGonagall. See. Conspiracy against the Ministry. Dumbledore building an army, just as I feared. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Actually, Minister, it was my army. Albus Dumbledore strode into the office, radiating calm power. His half-moon spectacles glinted in the firelight as he surveyed the scene. Your army? Fudge sputtered. You admit it? Of course, Dumbledore said pleasantly. Did you think these children organized themselves? Dumbledore's army, not Potter's army. I recruited them to prepare for the coming conflict. Susan watched in amazement as Dumbledore systematically claimed responsibility for everything, deflecting blame from Harry and the other students. When Fudge ordered his arrest, chaos erupted. A blinding flash filled the room. When Susan's vision cleared, Dumbledore was gone, and Fudge was shouting incoherently. Find him, he bellowed at the Aurors. Search the grounds. Kingsley winked discreetly at Harry before rushing out with his partner. In the confusion, McGonagall released Susan's bindings with a subtle flick of her wand. Miss Bones, Mr. Potter, return to your dormitories immediately, she ordered quietly. Umbridge looked ready to object, but Fudge was demanding her assistance, distracting her momentarily. Harry and Susan slipped out, barely breathing until they reached the staircase. Dumbledore's gone, Harry said hollowly. He sacrificed himself for us. For you, Susan corrected. He knew they'd expel you otherwise. What happens now? Susan touched his arm. Nothing good. Without Dumbledore. Umbridge takes over completely, Harry finished grimly. They paused at the point where they'd need to separate, Harry to Gryffindor Tower, Susan to the Hufflepuff basement. Be careful, Harry said, squeezing her hand. They'll be watching us even more closely now. You too. Susan hesitated, then embraced him quickly. We'll find a way to keep practicing. Both skills. Harry nodded, his green eyes determined despite everything. Tomorrow. Breakfast. Act normal. Normal, Susan agreed with a wan smile. Whatever that is anymore. Normal, as it turned out, was worse than they'd imagined. Umbridge wasted no time establishing her complete dominion over Hogwarts. Educational Decree No. 29 gave the Inquisitorial Squad power to dock house points, a privilege they abused mercilessly. 50 points from Hufflepuff for your shoelaces being untied, Bones, Pansy Parkinson declared during lunch. Susan ignored her, continuing her potions essay. Engaging only made things worse. Worse still was Umbridge's questioning of suspected DA members. One by one, students were called to her office. Most returned shaken, refusing to discuss what happened. She used Veritaserum on Cho, Ginny whispered during a clandestine meeting in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. That's how she got confirmation about the Room of Requirement. That's illegal, Hermione said, outraged. Veritaserum requires ministry approval for each use. You think Fudge didn't give her a blank authorization? Susan asked bitterly. He's terrified of Dumbledore's supposed army. Harry paced the damp floor. We need to keep practicing. Separately, in small groups. 3 people max. My turn for questioning is tomorrow, Neville said, looking pale but determined. Any advice? A Clemency Basics, Susan suggested. Focus on mundane memories, classes, meals, anything boring. And if that fails, accidentally knock over her tea, Ron added. Can't use Veritaserum if there's none left. They established a rotation for practicing in secret, 2 or 3 students meeting in forgotten corners of the castle, always with lookouts. Susan and Harry continued their acclimacy sessions during rare moments alone, often hiding in the secret passage behind the mirror on the 4th floor. April arrived with no improvement in the situation. Susan's letters from Aunt Amelia grew increasingly alarming. Fudge has suspended 3 more department heads for review, she told Harry during a whispered conversation in herbology. Anyone who questions the official line is being isolated or removed. What about your aunt? Protected, for now. Her reputation is too solid for direct action, but they've cut her budget and reassigned half her Aurors. Harry cursed under his breath. It's all connected. Voldemort's gaining power while Fudge weakens anyone who might stand against him. The prophets reporting disappearances again, Susan added. Just like the last war, according to Aunt Amelia. People vanishing without explanation. Professor Sprout approached their table, speaking louder than necessary. Those Sapophoros pods need more precise cutting, Mr. Potter. Perhaps Miss Bones can demonstrate the correct technique. As they bent over the plant together, Sprout whispered, Umbridge is inspecting the greenhouses again tomorrow. Be careful what you discuss. The warning proved timely. Umbridge shadowed Sprout throughout the next day's lesson, clipboard in hand, fake smile plastered on her face. Miss Bones, she called sweetly. A moment of your time. Susan approached cautiously, aware of Harry watching tensely from his station. Your aunt sent you a package this morning, Umbridge said, producing a small parcel. Most curious contents. Susan's heart sank. Aunt Amelia had mentioned sending her birthday gift early this year. Just a birthday present, Professor, she said calmly. My birthday's next week. Indeed. Umbridge unwrapped the package, revealing a delicate silver necklace with a tiny shield-shaped pendant. A rather unusual gift. It's a family heirloom, Susan explained. Bones women receive it on their 16th birthday. Umbridge dangled the necklace from her stubby fingers. Our inspection detected unusual enchantments. Quite complex for a simple piece of jewelry. It's goblin-made, Susan said, fighting to keep her voice steady. They often include protective charms. Protective against what, I wonder? Umbridge smiled unpleasantly. Perhaps against mind-influencing potions. Truth serums, for instance. Susan felt cold. The necklace was indeed designed to detect and neutralize foreign substances, a standard precaution for law enforcement officials and their families. I wouldn't know the specifics, Professor. No. Umbridge pocketed the necklace. Well, I'm afraid this will need to be confiscated for further examination. Security concerns, you understand. That's a family heirloom, Susan protested. You have no right, I have every right as headmistress. Umbridge's voice hardened. Unless you're questioning my authority. Susan bit her tongue. No, Professor. Good. You may return to your work. As Umbridge waddled away, Susan felt a wave of despair. The necklace had been her protection against Veritaserum, Aunt Amelia's way of safeguarding her without raising suspicion. After class, she pulled Harry aside. She knows. About the necklace, about everything. We need a new plan, Harry agreed grimly. I think it's time to involve Hermione. Hermione, predictably, had a solution within hours. Anti-detection charms, she explained, showing them a set of small blue tablets. Fred and George have been developing them for their skiving snack boxes. This version causes mild fever, enough to make Veritaserum ineffective without actually making you ill. Brilliant, Harry said. We'll distribute them to everyone still practicing. There's more, Hermione continued. I've found a way we can communicate safely. She produced a set of enchanted parchment squares. They work like the DA coins but can transmit short written messages. Tap with your wand and whisper the recipient's name. Susan took one gratefully. This changes everything. We can coordinate without meeting. Just be careful, Hermione warned. Use them only when absolutely necessary. Umbridge has detection charms all over the castle now. That night, Susan received her first message on the enchanted parchment, midnight. Astronomy Tower. Important news. Heart racing, she slipped out of the Hufflepuff dormitory under cover of darkness. The castle was eerily silent, most prefects having abandoned late patrols under Umbridge's reign. Harry waited at the tower, his face illuminated by wand light. Thanks for coming. Wasn't sure the parchment would work. Hermione's spells always work, Susan said. What's the news? Harry's expression was troubled. Two things. First, Fred and George left. Huge exit, swamp in the corridor, fireworks everywhere. They're opening their joke shop in Diagon Alley. Good for them, Susan said sincerely. This place is unbearable now anyway. Second thing's not good. Harry lowered his voice. Hagrid's brother is hiding in the forest. He's a giant. Susan blinked. A giant? In the Forbidden Forest? Hagrid brought him from the mountains. He's worried Umbridge will sack him, wants us to take care of Grawp if that happens. That's mental, I know. Harry ran a hand through his hair. But that's not the worst part. The centaurs are furious about a giant in their forest. They nearly killed Hagrid for bringing him. Susan frowned. This could explode at any moment. It gets worse, Harry continued. My occlumency lessons with Snape are officially over. I saw something I shouldn't have in his pensieve. Harry. What happened? It doesn't matter. Point is, I'm on my own with the dreams now. Not alone, Susan corrected. We'll keep practicing together. Harry's expression softened. I don't know what I'd do without you this year, Susan. Before she could respond, the tower door burst open. Filch stood there, lantern raised, Mrs. Norris at his feet. Students out of bed, he cackled. The headmistress will be pleased. Umbridge's office felt smaller with each visit. Susan sat rigidly in the hard wooden chair, refusing to look at the ornamental plates of mewling kittens on the walls. Miss Bones, Umbridge said, stirring tea with deliberate slowness. This is becoming a habit. Beside her, Harry remained silent, his face impassive. They'd both taken Hermione's fever tablets before being marched to the office. Astronomy Tower after midnight, Umbridge continued. Most inappropriate. I wonder what your aunt would think. Probably that astronomy is best observed at night, Susan replied evenly. Umbridge's smile tightened. Insolence won't help your situation. Nor yours, Mr. Potter. She pushed teacups toward them. Drink. Susan picked up her cup, pretending to sip while actually letting the liquid touch her closed lips. Harry did the same. Now, Umbridge leaned forward, tell me about your midnight meeting. What were you discussing? Susan felt the compulsion of Veritasrum trying to work, but the fever tablet created just enough physical interference to resist. OWL revision, she lied smoothly. The astronomy practical is next week. At midnight? Without permission. Best time to see the stars, Harry added, his voice slightly hoarse, a side effect of the tablet. Umbridge's eyes narrowed. You appear feverish, Mr. Potter. Just tired, Professor. Perhaps we should visit Madame Pomfrey. Umbridge's smile was dangerous. I understand she has excellent diagnostic spells that can detect foreign substances. Susan's stomach dropped. If Pomfrey examined them, she'd find the fever tablets immediately. A knock at the door interrupted the tense moment. Percy Weasley entered, looking self-important. Urgent communication from the minister, headmistress, he announced, handing her a sealed parchment. Umbridge read it quickly, her expression darkening. This requires immediate attention. She glared at Harry and Susan. Return to your dormitories. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow. Once safely away from Umbridge's office, Susan whispered, that was too close. We got lucky, Harry agreed. But she's getting suspicious about the Veritaserum resistance. We need a better solution, Susan said. And fast. They parted ways at the grand staircase, both aware their time was running out. The following week brought OWL examinations, a strangely normal concern amid the chaos. Students gathered in the Great Hall, bent over parchment while examiners patrolled the aisles. That wasn't so bad, Hermione said after their charms practical. Though I think I may have overdone the growth charm. Did your pineapple end up elephant-sized too? Ron rolled his eyes. Mine barely reached grapefruit status, Hermione. Susan smiled at Harry, who looked unusually distracted. You all right? Just tired, he murmured. Not sleeping well. The dreams had intensified according to their last occlumency session. Despite significant improvement in his mental barriers, Harry couldn't completely block the visions of the Department of Mysteries corridor. Tonight, Susan promised quietly. We'll practice after the History of Magic exam. But during the history exam that afternoon, disaster struck. Susan was halfway through a question about giant wars when a scream tore through the Great Hall. Harry had fallen from his chair, clutching his scar in agony. Mr. Potter! Professor Tofty exclaimed, rushing forward. Hospital wing, I think. No, Harry gasped, staggering to his feet. I'm fine. Sorry. Nightmare. Susan watched in horror as Harry was escorted from the hall, his face ashen. The moment the exam ended, she raced to find him, eventually locating him in an empty classroom with Ron and Hermione. Got serious, Harry was saying urgently. Voldemort's torturing him in the Department of Mysteries. We have to go now. Susan froze in the doorway. Harry. He turned, his face wild with desperation. Susan. It's serious, Voldemort has him. Slow down, Susan approached carefully. You had a vision. It wasn't just a vision, Harry insisted. It's happening now. Sirius is being tortured for something Voldemort wants. Hermione looked skeptical. Harry, remember what Dumbledore said about these visions. Voldemort might be planting them. This was different, Harry argued. More real. We should check first, Susan said firmly. See if Sirius is where he's supposed to be. How? Ron asked. Umbridge is monitoring every fireplace, every owl. Not every fireplace, Harry said suddenly. Umbridge's office. It's the only one not being watched. Harry, that's mad, Hermione protested. If she catches you, I don't care. Sirius is the only family I have left. Susan placed her hands on Harry's shoulders. Listen to me. I believe you saw something real. But what if it's a trap? What if Voldemort wants you to rush to the Ministry? Harry hesitated, the first doubt crossing his face. Let me contact Aunt Amelia, Susan continued. She can check discreetly. If Sirius really is there, she'll help. There's no time, there's enough to be smart about this, Susan insisted. My enchanted parchment connects directly to her office. Give me 5 minutes. Harry looked torn, but finally nodded. 5 minutes. Then we go. Susan wrote quickly on her parchment, urgent. Harry saw a vision of Sirius Black captive in Department Mysteries. Need verification. Possible trap. The response came almost instantly, checking. Keep Potter at Hogwarts. Stand by. She's checking, Susan told the others. Now we wait. Those 5 minutes stretched endlessly. Harry paced like a caged animal, while Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances. Finally, the parchment glowed. Susan read aloud, Black confirmed safe at alternate location. Vision false. Tell Potter do not leave castle. Sending reinforcements to Ministry as precaution. Respond to confirm. Harry stopped pacing. What? Sirius is safe, Susan repeated. It was a trap, Harry. The relief on his face quickly turned to confusion. But it felt so real. That's what Voldemort wanted, Hermione said quietly. To lure you there. Susan wrote back, message received. Potter staying at Hogwarts. Will maintain contact. I need to see him, Harry said suddenly. Sirius. I need to know he's really okay. Amelia says he's safe, Susan assured him. She wouldn't lie about that. But, the classroom door burst open. Umbridge stood there, flanked by the inquisitorial squad, her wide mouth stretched in triumph. Well, well, she said sweetly. A secret meeting? After exams? How suspicious. Draco Malfoy smirked from behind her. Found them using the portable swamp as a distraction, Professor. Very predictable. Umbridge's eyes fixed on the enchanted parchment in Susan's hand. What's this? Unauthorized communication device. Before Susan could hide it, Pansy Parkinson snatched the parchment. Look, Professor. It's still showing a message. Umbridge read it, her eyes widening. Amelia Bones. Ministry reinforcements. She looked up, face mottled with rage. What have you done? Nothing yet, Harry said coldly. But Voldemort's planning something at the Ministry tonight. Lies. Umbridge shrieked. More lies. She rounded on Susan. Your aunt has overstepped for the last time, Miss Bones. This conspiracy ends now. She ordered the inquisitorial squad to escort them to her office. As they were marched through the corridors, Susan caught Harry's eye. Trust Aunt Amelia, she mouthed silently. She'll handle it. In Umbridge's office, the interrogation began in earnest. Without their fever tablets, Susan feared the worst. But when Umbridge produced her Veritasium bottle, it was empty. Used the last of it on those Ravenclaws, she muttered. No matter. There are other ways to loosen tongues. What followed was one of the most surreal experiences of Susan's life. Umbridge threatened to use the Cruciatus curse. Snape appeared and departed with cryptic comments about Padfoot. Hermione led Umbridge on a wild story about a weapon in the Forbidden Forest. When Hermione and Harry left with Umbridge, Susan exchanged worried glances with Ron. We need backup, she whispered. Bit difficult while tied to chairs, Ron muttered, struggling against his bindings. The arrival of Ginny, Neville, and Luna was unexpected but welcome. Even more surprising was their swift dispatching of the inquisitorial squad. Ginny's bat bogey hex is terrifying, Neville explained as he untied Susan. Where's Harry? Ginny asked urgently. Forest, Susan explained quickly. With Hermione and Umbridge. Something about a weapon. It's a diversion, Ron added. You know who sent Harry a false vision about Sirius being tortured. We need to find them before Harry does something reckless. Susan retrieved her enchanted parchment from Umbridge's desk. Aunt Amelia sent people to the Ministry already. We need to get Harry back to the castle. The journey into the forest revealed chaos. Umbridge had apparently insulted the centaurs and been carried off. Hermione and Harry stood in a clearing, disheveled but unharmed. Harry. Susan rushed forward. What happened? Umbridge is indisposed, Harry said grimly. Centaur issues. Did you get my message about Sirius? Susan asked. He's safe. Aunt Amelia confirmed it. Harry nodded, but still looked troubled. I need to be certain. I need to see for myself. We can't leave Hogwarts, Hermione argued. Not all of us, Harry agreed. But I have to go. Susan made a split-second decision. If you're going, I'm coming too. We all are, Neville said firmly, the others nodding. Harry looked like he might argue, then sighed. How do we get to London? Luna's dreamy voice answered, we fly, of course. And that was how, despite all warnings and logic, Susan found herself mounting a thestral, invisible to her, but terrifyingly real beneath her hands, preparing to fly to London on the strangest mission of her life. As they soared into the darkening sky, Susan wondered if she'd made the right choice. Aunt Amelia had explicitly warned them to stay at Hogwarts. But looking at Harry's determined face, she knew she couldn't let him face whatever waited at the Ministry alone. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Chapter 3, When Everything Falls Apart. Flying to London on the back of an invisible thestral was easily the most terrifying experience of Susan's life. The wind whipped her hair as she clung desperately to the creature's mane, cities and towns blurring beneath them. You okay? Harry shouted over the rush of air. Fine. Susan lied, her knuckles white from gripping the thestral's neck. She wasn't afraid of heights, but flying without a broom, on a creature she couldn't even see, was next-level scary. The journey felt endless, but finally, the sprawling lights of London appeared below. The thestrals descended toward a street Susan recognized immediately, the visitors' entrance to the Ministry of Magic. They dismounted awkwardly, Susan stumbling as her feet hit solid ground. Her legs trembled from the flight, but she forced herself upright, drawing her wand. Harry, are you sure about this? Hermione asked, her voice tense. Susan's aunt confirmed Sirius is safe. Harry's expression hardened. I need to see for myself. And if Voldemort's planning something here, we need to warn people. The Aurors are already on alert, Susan reminded him, pulling out her enchanted parchment. Let me update Aunt Amelia. She wrote quickly, at Ministry entrance. 6 students total. Please advise. The response came almost instantly, do not enter. Aurors in position. Trap confirmed. Harry, look, Susan showed him the message. They've already set up a counter-ambush. Harry hesitated, conflict clear on his face. What if it's not enough? What if they don't know exactly where to go? Then tell me, a new voice said. They spun around to find Amelia Bones herself stepping out of the shadows, her monocle glinting in the streetlight. 2 disguised Aurors flanked her. Aunt Amelia. Susan rushed forward. Amelia embraced her briefly before fixing Harry with a stern look. Mr. Potter, I believe I instructed you to remain at Hogwarts. I had to be sure, Harry said, not backing down. About Sirius. Black is safe at headquarters with Lupin, Amelia confirmed. We verified through secure channels before sending reinforcements. The tension visibly drained from Harry's shoulders. Then the vision was false. Precisely as we suspected, Amelia nodded. A trap meant to lure you here. Ron looked around nervously. So what now? Now, Amelia said briskly, you 6 return to Hogwarts immediately. No, Harry said firmly. If Death Eaters are coming, I should be here. Absolutely not, Amelia's voice brooked no argument. You're exactly who they want, Potter. Which means I can help spring the trap, Harry insisted. Use me as bait. Susan grabbed his arm. Harry, that's mental. It's not, Harry turned to her. Think about it. If they're expecting me, we can control the situation. Amelia studied him thoughtfully. What exactly did you see in this vision, Potter? Details matter. Harry described the corridor, the hall of glass spheres, the exact spot where he'd seen Sirius being tortured. The Hall of Prophecy, Amelia murmured. As we suspected. Prophecy? Hermione asked sharply. Amelia ignored the question. Shacklebolt, she addressed one of the disguised Aurors, take the children to the safe point. With respect, Madam Bones, the Auror replied, we're already understaffed. If Potter knows the target location. A silent communication passed between them. Finally, Amelia sighed. Against my better judgment, she said, Potter may assist with directing our forces. The rest of you will remain with Dawlish at the secure location. If Harry's staying, we're staying, Ron said immediately. The others nodded. Absolutely not, Amelia began, but Harry interrupted. They've all trained in the DA, he said. They're better prepared than most adults. Susan couldn't believe Harry was arguing for them to stay. Harry, this is crazy. We should all leave. There's no time for debate, Amelia checked her watch. Our intelligence suggests they'll arrive within the hour. She made a swift decision. Fine. The older students may assist with perimeter positions only. Miss Lovegood and Miss Weasley will remain with Dawlish. Ginny immediately protested, but Amelia silenced her with a look that Susan knew all too well. Non-negotiable, her aunt said. Now move. We have positions to take. The Department of Mysteries was eerily silent as they moved through its labyrinthine corridors. Susan stayed close to Harry, her wand gripped tightly. Ahead, Aunt Amelia conferred quietly with Kingsley Shacklebolt and another Auror Susan didn't recognize. They'd left Ginny and Luna with Dawlish in a secure room near the lifts, much to Ginny's vocal displeasure. Now the remaining 4 students followed the Aurors through the strange department. This is it, Harry whispered as they approached a plain black door. The door from my dreams. Amelia signaled for silence as they entered a circular room with identical doors. When the room spun around them, Harry pointed confidently to one door. That one. The Hall of Prophecy. Inside was a vast chamber filled with towering shelves of small glass spheres, each glowing with a faint inner light. The Aurors spread out, taking defensive positions behind shelves. Row 97, Harry whispered. That's where I saw Sirius. Amelia directed them to hidden positions, placing Susan, Hermione, Ron and Neville behind a shelf near the entrance. Harry she kept closer, using him to identify the exact location. There's something here, Harry said suddenly, stopping at a specific shelf. A prophecy with my name on it. Don't touch anything, Amelia warned. That's what they want. Before Harry could respond, a distant door opened. Footsteps echoed through the hall. In position, Amelia whispered. No one moves until my signal. Susan's heart hammered as she pressed against the shelf, Hermione beside her. From their position, they could just see dark figures entering the hall, a dozen Death Eaters in masks and robes. Spread out, a familiar drawling voice ordered. The boy should be here soon. Susan recognized Lucius Malfoy instantly. Beside him stood a wild-haired witch Susan had seen in Daily Prophet photos, Bellatrix Lestrange, the woman who'd helped murder her uncle's family. Her hand tightened on her wand. Hermione shot her a warning glance. The Death Eaters moved deeper into the hall, approaching row 97. He should have seen it by now, a gruff voice complained. The Dark Lord was certain. Patience, Malfoy hissed. The boy is predictably heroic. He'll come. They passed directly in front of Susan's hiding place. She held her breath, pressing deeper into the shadows. Then Harry stepped out from behind a distant shelf, directly into their path. Looking for me? He called. Susan bit back a gasp. This wasn't the plan. Harry was supposed to stay hidden with Amelia. Potter, Malfoy sounded pleased. Right on schedule. Where's Sirius? Harry demanded, playing his role. The little baby thinks his godfather's here, Bellatrix mocked in a sing-song voice. How adorable. I know he's not here, Harry said coldly. Just like I know why you are. The Death Eaters tensed. Malfoy stepped forward. Then you understand what we require. Fetch it for us, and perhaps we'll let your friends live. My friends? Harry looked genuinely confused. Bellatrix laughed. We know you didn't come alone, Potter. You never do. Susan froze. Had they been discovered? You're right, Harry said. I didn't. That was the signal. Light erupted from all directions as the hidden Aurors cast stunning spells simultaneously. 2 Death Eaters dropped immediately. Ambush! Malfoy shouted, diving behind a shelf. Chaos erupted. Spells flew in all directions, shattering prophecies and sending glass raining down. Susan and Hermione fired stunners from their position while Ron and Neville provided covering fire. Target Potter! Bellatrix screamed. Get him to grab the prophecy. Susan lost sight of Harry in the confusion. Spells blasted shelves apart around them, forcing the students to scatter. Susan! Hermione yelled. Behind you! Susan spun to find a masked Death Eater looming over her. Stupefy, she shouted, but he deflected it easily. Crucio, the Death Eater countered. Susan dove sideways, the curse missing her by inches. She scrambled behind a fallen shelf. Diffindo! Hermione's spell caught the Death Eater's arm, causing him to howl in pain. Susan seized the opportunity. Petrificus Totalis! The Death Eater went rigid, crashing to the floor. Come on! Hermione grabbed Susan's hand, pulling her toward a side door. We need to regroup. They burst into another room, circular, with a strange archway on a dais at its center. Harry was already there, dueling Lucius Malfoy while Kingsley battled 2 other Death Eaters. The prophecy, Potter! Malfoy demanded. Give it to me. I don't have it. Harry shouted back, dodging a curse. Susan and Hermione joined the fight, firing hexes at Malfoy, forcing him to divide his attention. More combatants poured into the room, Ron and Neville from one door, Aunt Amelia and another Auror from another. Then Bellatrix entered, her face alight with maniacal glee. Bombarda Maxima, she shrieked, aiming at the ceiling. The explosion rocked the room. Chunks of stone rained down, separating the fighters. Through the dust and debris, Susan lost sight of Harry. Harry, she screamed, coughing through the dust cloud. A hand grabbed her arm. Aunt Amelia pulled her behind a fallen column. Stay down. But Harry is being protected, Amelia said firmly. Shacklebolt has him. The dust began to settle, revealing the chaotic scene. Several Death Eaters lay stunned or bound. Others continued fighting fiercely. Hermione was bleeding from a cut on her forehead but still standing, back to back with Ron. Neville had somehow acquired a Death Eater's wand and was using both it and his own simultaneously, with limited success but impressive determination. Then Susan spotted Harry across the room, sheltered behind the strange archway with Kingsley. Relief flooded through her, until she saw Bellatrix taking aim. Avada, no. Susan broke from her aunt's grip, running into the open. Flipendo. Her knockback jinx hit Bellatrix's shoulder, disrupting her curse. The killing spell went wide, hitting the archway instead. Bellatrix whirled toward Susan, her face contorted with rage. You dare. Before Susan could react, multiple things happened at once. A new wave of Order members burst through the doors, Sirius Black himself, Remus Lupin, and others Susan didn't recognize. Simultaneously, Aunt Amelia fired a blasting spell at Bellatrix, forcing her away from Susan. And from the central doorway came Albus Dumbledore, his power radiating like physical force. It's Dumbledore, someone shouted. The fighting intensified as Death Eaters realized they were now outnumbered. Some tried to flee while others fought more desperately. Susan ducked behind a pillar, trying to reach Harry, who was now fighting alongside his godfather against Malfoy and another Death Eater. Harry, she called, trying to be heard over the chaos. He glanced her way, momentary relief crossing his face, just as Bellatrix reappeared, targeting Sirius. "Watch out!" Susan screamed. Sirius turned, barely deflecting Bellatrix's curse. Harry seized the opportunity to stun Malfoy, who collapsed in a heap. Susan finally reached Harry's side, grabbing his arm. "Are you okay?" "Fine," he gasped. "You." Before she could answer, an inhuman scream tore through the chamber. All fighting ceased as a dark wraith-like form materialized in the center of the room. Lord Voldemort had arrived. His serpentine face surveyed the scene with cold fury. "Dumbledore," he hissed. "Tom," Dumbledore replied calmly, stepping forward. What followed was unlike any duel Susan had ever witnessed. The two most powerful wizards alive unleashed magic beyond comprehension, fire and water, light and darkness, transfiguration beyond Newt level. The rest of the combatants pressed back against the walls, the Death Eaters as awestruck as the Order members. Through the magnificent and terrifying display, Susan kept her grip on Harry's arm, holding him back as he instinctively tried to join the fight. "There's nothing we can do," she whispered. "Not against this." The duel reached its climax as Dumbledore conjured a fiery lasso that encircled Voldemort. For a moment, it seemed victory was at hand, then Voldemort simply vanished. The moment of confusion that followed was shattered by Harry suddenly collapsing, his body convulsing violently. "Harry!" Susan knelt beside him in panic. His eyes had rolled back, his face contorting in agony. When he spoke, it wasn't Harry's voice but a high, cold tone that chilled Susan's blood. "Kill me now, Dumbledore," the voice hissed from Harry's mouth. "If death is nothing, kill the boy." Dumbledore knelt on Harry's other side, his ancient face filled with sorrow. "Harry," he said softly. "Remember who you are." Susan clutched Harry's hand. "Fight him, Harry. He doesn't know you. Not like we do." Harry continued to thrash, his body arching in pain. Susan refused to let go, even as his grip threatened to crush her fingers. "You're not alone," she whispered fiercely. "Remember everyone who loves you. Remember who loves you." Something flickered across Harry's face, recognition, determination. He went rigid, then gasped, "Get out." His body gave one final violent shudder, then went still. For a horrifying moment, Susan thought he was dead, until his eyes opened, fully his own again. "He's gone," Harry whispered hoarsely. Around them, the fight had ended. Ministry officials flooded the chamber, led by a stunned-looking Cornelius Fudge. He was there. Fudge sputtered, pointing at the spot where Voldemort had vanished. "You know who?" "Here. In the Ministry." "As I have been telling you for a year, Cornelius," Dumbledore said wearily. "Perhaps now you will take appropriate action." Susan helped Harry to his feet as the adults began securing Death Eaters and treating the injured. Hermione rushed over, followed by Ron and Neville. "Harry. Are you all right?" Harry nodded weakly, leaning against Susan for support. "He was in my head. Voldemort." His voice trembled. "He possessed me." "But you fought him off," Susan said firmly. "You won." Before Harry could respond, Aunt Amelia approached, her robes torn but her composure intact. "Potter," she said with surprising gentleness. "You and your friends need medical attention." "Is everyone?" Harry couldn't finish the question. "No fatalities on our side," Amelia assured him. Though not for lack of trying on theirs. Relief washed over Harry's face. "Sirius? Remus? Both fine. Minor injuries only." As Amelia led them toward the exit, Susan caught sight of Dumbledore watching Harry with a troubled expression. Something unspoken passed between the headmaster and her aunt, some knowledge or concern that made Susan's skin prickle with foreboding. But that was a worry for later. Right now, they were alive, Voldemort's trap had failed, and for the first time all year, the world would know the truth. The aftermath unfolded with dizzying speed. By morning, the Daily Prophet's headline screamed, "HEWHO must not be named returns," complete with witness statements from ministry officials. Fudge had issued a public apology to Harry and Dumbledore, acknowledging the year of denial had been a catastrophic mistake. Dumbledore was reinstated as headmaster, arriving at Hogwarts to thunderous applause from students and staff alike. His first act was to dismiss Umbridge, who was promptly taken into custody by Aunt Amelia's Aurors for illegal use of a blood quill on minors. The inquisitorial squad disbanded overnight, its members suddenly claiming they'd been just following orders. Draco Malfoy disappeared from classes entirely after his father's arrest. And through it all, Harry moved like a ghost, physically present but mentally elsewhere. Susan found him by the lake 3 days after their return, skipping stones across the still water. "Hey," she said, sitting beside him on the rocky shore. "Missed you at breakfast." Harry glanced at her, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Not hungry. Nightmares again?" He nodded, tossing another stone. "Different now. Not the corridor. Just, memories of that night. Voldemort in my head." Susan reached for his hand. "You fought him off. That's what matters. This time." Harry's voice was hollow. "What about next time? Or the time after that?" "You'll fight him again," Susan said with conviction. "And you'll win again." Harry was quiet for a long moment, staring across the lake. "Dumbledore told me why Voldemort wants to kill me." Susan's breath caught. "Why?" "There's a prophecy. The one in the Department of Mysteries with my name on it." Harry's voice was flat, emotionless. "It says neither of us can live while the other survives. I have to kill him, or he'll kill me." The weight of his words settled between them like a physical presence. Susan tried to process the enormity of it. Harry, barely 16, destined to face the darkest wizard of all time. "That's why my parents died," Harry continued. "That's why he keeps coming after me. It's always been leading to this." Susan squeezed his hand. "You're not alone in this, Harry." He finally looked at her, really looked at her. "Everyone who gets close to me becomes a target." "I already am a target," Susan reminded him. "My family fought him in the First War. My uncle's family was murdered. The Bones name is on his list with or without you. This is different." "I know," Susan said softly. "But it doesn't change anything for me." Harry studied her face. "You could have died in the Department of Mysteries. When Bellatrix aimed at you." "But I didn't," Susan cut him off. "None of us did. Because we were prepared, because we fought together." This time, Harry echoed his earlier words. Susan shifted to face him fully. "Harry, do you remember what I told you when Voldemort was possessing you? That he doesn't know you like we do." Harry nodded slowly. "That's your strength," she continued. "You have something he'll never understand. People who love you. People who'll fight beside you, not because of some prophecy, but because of who you are." "But what if that's not enough?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Then we'll make it enough," Susan said firmly. "We'll train harder. We'll learn more. We'll be ready." Harry was silent for a long moment. Then, almost to himself, "I've been thinking about what happened when he was in my head. How I pushed him out." "What do you remember?" "It wasn't power," Harry said slowly. "It was feeling. When you reminded me of the people who care about me, it was like poison to him. He couldn't stand it." Susan smiled. "See? You already have what you need." "Maybe," Harry conceded. Then he added quietly, "When I was fighting him off, your voice was the clearest thing I heard. Your face was what I focused on." Heat rushed to Susan's cheeks. "Really?" "Yeah." Harry looked almost embarrassed. "You said, 'Remember who loves you.' And I thought of you." The words hung between them, neither fully acknowledging their weight. Finally, Susan said, "Good. Because it's true." Harry's eyes widened slightly, but before he could respond, voices called from the castle. Ron and Hermione were walking toward them, waving. Later, Susan whispered, standing and pulling Harry to his feet. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary. Later, he agreed. The end-of-year feast felt surreal after everything that had happened. Dumbledore had awarded substantial house points for the Ministry battle, putting Gryffindor and Hufflepuff in a tie for the House Cup. The Great Hall was decorated in both scarlet and yellow, a symbolic unity that seemed fitting after the year's events. A shared victory, Dumbledore announced, to remind us that together, we are stronger than any force that would divide us. Susan sat at the Hufflepuff table for the feast, reconnecting with housemates who'd kept their distance during Umbridge's reign. Hannah peppered her with questions about the Ministry battle, while Ernie offered formal apologies for his earlier skepticism. "You were right all along," he admitted. "About Potter. About everything. Just remember that next time," Susan said, but without bitterness. After facing Death Eaters, schoolyard politics seemed trivial. Across the hall, Harry caught her eye and smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in days. They'd made plans to meet after the feast, away from the crowd and well-meaning friends. When dinner ended, Susan slipped away to their arranged meeting spot, the 7th-floor corridor outside the room of requirement. Harry was waiting, pacing back and forth until the door materialized. "After you," he said, holding it open. The room had configured itself as a cozy sitting area with a window overlooking the grounds, similar to how they'd first practiced occlumency. "I've been thinking," Harry said as they sat beside each other on a comfortable sofa. "About this summer." Susan nodded. After Sirius's public exoneration, another result of the Ministry battle, Harry had been invited to live with him. "You'll finally have a proper home," she said. "Yeah." Harry looked both excited and uncertain. "Sirius has a house in London. It's not great, family home of the Blacks and all, but we're going to fix it up." "That's wonderful, Harry. The thing is," he continued, "it's also headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix. Which means it'll be busy with people coming and going. Strategy meetings, planning." "The war," Susan said quietly. Harry nodded. "Your aunt's joined the Order officially now. Dumbledore says having the head of magical law enforcement as an ally changes everything. She's mentioned being busier than ever. The Ministry's finally taking action. That's why I wanted to ask." Harry hesitated, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Would you want to visit? During the summer?" Susan's heart leapt. "Visit you and Sirius?" "Yeah. I mean, your aunt will be there for meetings anyway," and Sirius suggested, "that is, if you wanted to." Susan smiled at his awkwardness. "I'd love to." "Really?" "Of course." Susan reached for his hand. "Though I was going to invite you to visit us too. Bones Manor is probably safer than London, according to Aunt Amelia." Harry brightened. "I'd like that. If Sirius can come too." "Absolutely. Aunt Amelia's already mentioned it, actually. Something about coordinating security protocols." Harry laughed. "Is that what they're calling it? Sounds like they just want us supervised. Can you blame them?" Susan grinned. "We did sneak off to battle Death Eaters." "Successfully battled Death Eaters," Harry corrected. They fell into comfortable silence, hands linked between them. "It's not going to be an easy summer," Harry said finally. "Or an easy year after. Voldemort's exposed now, but that just means he'll act more openly." "I know," Susan said softly. "Aunt Amelia's already increased security at home. She thinks we'll be targeted, especially after the Ministry." Harry's grip tightened. "I shouldn't have let you come." "You didn't let me do anything," Susan reminded him. "I made my own choice." I'll keep making it. Harry studied their intertwined fingers. This thing between us, it makes you an even bigger target. So I should what? Stay away from you? Pretend I don't care? Susan shook her head. That's exactly what Voldemort wants, to isolate you, to make you feel alone. But if something happened to you because of me, Susan placed her free hand against his cheek, turning his face toward hers. Harry James Potter. After everything we've been through this year, do you really think I'm walking away now? The conflict in his eyes slowly gave way to something warmer. No. I need you to understand what you're getting into. I understand better than most, Susan said. My family's been fighting dark wizards for generations. It's practically the family business. Harry smiled reluctantly. Bones' family tradition. Exactly. Fight evil, uphold justice, fall for messy-haired boys with hero complexes. Is that last one really a tradition? Harry asked, leaning closer. I might be starting a new one, Susan admitted, closing the distance between them. The kiss was different from their previous ones, not rushed by circumstance or fueled by adrenaline. It was gentle, deliberate, a promise rather than an impulse. When they finally pulled apart, Harry rested his forehead against hers. I'm really glad you defended me in the Great Hall that day. I'm really glad you invited me to the DA, Susan countered. I'm really glad you sent me that Murtlap essence. I'm really glad you asked me to Hogsmeade. Harry grinned. We could do this all night. We could, Susan agreed. Or. She kissed him again, cutting off further conversation. Later, as they reluctantly prepared to return to their dormitories before curfew, Harry grew serious again. Whatever happens next year, with Voldemort, with the war, I want you to know that meeting you, really getting to know you, was the best thing about this year. Susan smiled. Not getting rid of Umbridge. Or exposing Voldemort. Or clearing Sirius's name. Those were pretty good too, Harry admitted. But you saw me when I needed someone most. Not the boy who lived. Just Harry. I've always seen you, Harry, Susan said softly. Since we were 5 years old. Harry's brow furrowed. 5? What do you mean? Susan realized she'd never told him about their first meeting. It's a long story. I'll tell you on the train tomorrow. As they left the room of requirement, hand in hand, Susan knew the path ahead would be dangerous. War was coming. People they loved would be at risk. The prophecy hung over Harry like a shadow. But for the first time, Harry wasn't facing it alone. He had Sirius, he had the Order, he had friends who would fight beside him. And he had Susan Bones, who had loved him since they were children, and who would stand with him through whatever came next. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.